It was an ordinary day at work, one of those when everything seems to be running smoothly. As usual, I kept my tattoo hidden, the small vine of ivy curling across the top of my foot, carefully covered by my socks and shoes. It wasn't that I was ashamed of it. It was simply easier to keep it out of sight while I worked, especially with the children around. Tattoos can be a sensitive subject, and I didn't want to draw unnecessary attention to myself. But that day, the weather decided to throw a curveball. A sudden downpour caught us off guard, soaking the playground and leaving puddles that formed around the edges of the swings and slides. My shoes, which had been fine when I first stepped outside, were now drenched. I could feel the fabric of my socks sticking to my skin, the squelching sound as I walked uncomfortable and distracting. In an attempt to avoid blisters and discomfort, I decided to quickly take off my shoes and socks. I was kneeling down, struggling to untangle the soaked fabric from my feet, when a young voice interrupted my thoughts. "Wow, what's that?" Startled, I glanced up to see one of the children standing nearby, eyes wide with curiosity, pointing at my exposed foot. It wasn't the first time a child had noticed the tattoo, but I wasn't quite prepared for this particular moment. "Oh, that's just a tattoo," I explained, glancing at the delicate ivy that snaked around my foot. "It's like a permanent drawing on your skin. You can get them when you turn 18. The child, fascinated, took a step closer, her wide eyes scanning my foot with innocent wonder. "Can I touch it?" "Sure, it just feels like skin," I replied with a soft smile, gesturing for her to come closer. I knew that for children, a tattoo was a mysterious thing, something that seemed both strange and intriguing. One by one, more children gathered around me, their small fingers reaching out tentatively to touch the vine. I felt a surge of warmth as I saw the curiosity in their faces. But just as I was starting to relax, I heard a voice, sharp and authoritative, approaching from behind me. "Is that a tattoo?" a woman asked, her voice thick with disapproval. I looked up, meeting the gaze of a mother who had appeared out of nowhere. She wasn't smiling, her brow furrowed in a frown. Before I could respond, she added, "You should be ashamed of yourself. You're setting a bad example for these children. That could be a gang symbol or something related to drugs like marijuana." I stood up a little straighter, my body stiffening at the sudden confrontation. "Ma'am, it's just ivy," I said calmly, trying to maintain my composure. She didn't seem convinced, her face reddening as her voice grew louder. "What? I don't know anything about your drug symbols. This is highly unprofessional, and I will be speaking to your boss. Advocating drugs like this. What are you teaching these children?" I could feel the other children growing uneasy as the situation escalated. It was as though a shadow had descended over our little moment of innocent curiosity. I took a deep breath, forcing my voice to remain steady, despite the rising tension. "I'm really sorry, ma'am. I'll be sure to hide my tattoo next time, but I assure you it has nothing to do with drugs or any illegal behavior." Her eyes narrowed, clearly unconvinced. "You'd better," she snapped, her voice laced with anger. "I can't believe you're even allowed to work with kids. I'll make sure you're reported for this. You're setting a terrible example." The woman huffed angrily, her arms crossed tightly over her chest as she bent down to pick up her daughter, who had been silently standing by her side. But as she leaned over, my eyes caught a glimpse of something that made my breath catch in my throat. There, just above the waistband of her low-rise jeans, was a tattoo. 2 dolphins, intricately designed but sitting just above her thong. It was a tramp stamp, one of those tattoos that often carries a stigma, a symbol that, fairly or not, was often associated with negative connotations. I couldn't help it. I looked at her, then back at the dolphins, the realization dawning on me. The irony of the situation was not lost on me. "Nice dolphins," I said with a polite smile, my voice low, though I couldn't hide the trace of sarcasm that laced my words. Her face immediately flushed with anger, her eyes flashing. "I'm an adult," she snapped. "Don't you dare judge me." I froze, taken aback by the venom in her voice. I hadn't meant to offend her, not really. But her reaction spoke volumes. It was as if her own insecurities had caught up with her, and I, simply by pointing out her tattoo, had unwittingly struck a nerve. "I'm not judging you, ma'am," I said softly, holding my ground, though my heart raced in my chest. "But it's funny how we can both have tattoos, yet mine is a problem while yours isn't it?" She glared at me, her lips tight in a thin line. Without another word, she grabbed her daughter and stormed off, muttering under her breath about how unprofessional I was. As I stood there, still processing the exchange, the children slowly dispersed, no longer as curious about my tattoo. My foot felt cold from the dampness, but I couldn't bring myself to put my shoes back on just yet. Instead, I stared after the woman, wondering if her anger had been more about something personal than about my tattoo at all. I couldn't help but wonder, was it really the tattoo that bothered her? Or was it something deeper? Had I become the target of her frustration because she saw in me something that she resented in herself? The day had taken a strange turn, but I couldn't dwell on it for long. The children would need me again soon, and I had a job to do. Still, as I slipped my shoes back on and headed back to work, the memory of that confrontation stayed with me, a reminder that sometimes our biggest critics are the ones who have the most to hide.